But I'm happy to welcome everyone here today. If you don't know about Brandjectory and what we do, I'm here with my lovely wife and co-founder, Susan Bryanton. And we are Brandjectory. We provide early stage CPG brands, anything you'd find at Whole Foods, Sprouts, or at any specialty store across the country. We provide them with a process where they can learn how to engage and get exposure and really get educated on the CPG arena, especially if they are new to it or if they just want to continue to expand and continue to grow. And we do that through a number of ways. We have a very extensive knowledge base, really the most extensive in the country in CPG. We have some 450 articles and videos of all the events we've had, and articles about how to fundraise and how to communicate with investors. Everything's written from the perspective of what investors want to know about a strong business. And then we provide a series of regular meetings every month, all virtual, like this, where there's education, there's a chance to meet and work with investors, the chance to go one-on-one in a problem-solving session with an industry expert, opportunities to practice pitch with investors, fundraising labs. We bring in a fundraising expert who will answer questions from the field. We bring in people on trade spend and legal issues to do the same thing. We have the ability to connect you to mentors and coaches who can give you a half hour of their time to help you through a problem. We hold pitch slams. We have founder only meetups where we get together as a founder team and problem solve. And some of the folks on here can attest to what we do. But I invite all of you to take a look at our website. I'll put all the contact information for me and Susan and for Peter and his company in the chat as we go forward. But we do a lot to keep brands going, to keep brands moving along, to give them the chance to meet investors. We've had 3 brands so far this year that have found investment, and we're excited about that. It sure is a change from last year when things were slow. So we're excited to see what continues this year. And with that, if you have any questions, just reach out to me at tom@brandjectory.com, and I will be putting that in the chat in just a moment. So with that, I want to introduce Peter. I want to let Peter introduce himself. He and I have had some great conversations so far this year, so I'm excited to bring this here to you today. He's going to be talking about implementing AI in your organization. He works with CPG brands, but he's kind of an expert on this, and he's an expert on how to get started. And we really want to talk about, how you can start using your data, your information that you have available, and what you can do with that. And that's what I'm really hoping that we can really start understanding, what it is about implementing AI that everybody has to do, and maybe some takeaways for you. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and introduce you to Peter O'Sullivan of High Beam Analytics, and I'll let Peter go from there, tell you about his background, and if you have any questions afterwards, there will be about 15-20 minutes at the end for you to ask those questions. Please put them in the chat. It'll help me keep track of them. And if they're pertinent to the conversation at the time, I'll rudely interrupt Peter to ask that question. So with that, Peter, the rest of the show is yours.
Thank you very much. You're welcome to rudely interrupt. If I think I'm going to answer it, I'll just push it back. But if we can answer it there, so thanks for everybody for kind of digging in. I'll start with sort of my background. So I've got about 20 plus years of management consulting. And the trick that I used to use was, and still do, is I would come in with my bucket of Excel sheets and do an analysis on the company with their income statement, balance sheets, and then additional data. And then I would be able to have, tremendous insight for the company itself, and then be able to recommend next steps. Along the way, I got to work for some larger companies, over $400 million. And they had a whole data team in place with business intelligence software. And I didn't know what it was, but I quickly found out what it was, which is some of the brand names are Power BI and Tableau, Looker, Domo. There's a whole bunch of them out there, and they're really amazing tools. Their job is to pull data from whatever source, put it into a central repository, and typically the best way to do that is in a database, do the calculations, and then it can deliver analysis to people according to who needs what at what time. So that's basically the idea behind business intelligence. Well, along the way comes AI about the same time, and AI has two different elements, and I'm going to take you through that. And that's where business intelligence provides a foundation to implement AI, because one of the problems we all have running these organizations is this stuff is really powerful, but how do I actually put it into my organization? So hopefully in the next few minutes, I'll show you one really good method for doing that, and that's using business intelligence. So I'm going to share my screen. First, I'm going to, well, let me share the screen, and then I'll blow it up so you can all see it. So the company name is Highbeam Analytics, and the application that I built is InsightQ.
Excuse me, could everybody please mute their phones? If their phones and their PCs, please mute. Thank you. I'm sorry, Peter, please go ahead.
No problem. So let's walk through the agenda, which is what is, well, how to implement AI, start with business intelligence, what it is, when to use it, and how to implement. So let's kind of start with what is data analytics. And really, basically, Excel is data analytics. Just about everything is data analytics. And the reason why we care about that is because data analytics' job is to provide meaningful patterns, effective decision-making, and quantify performance. And the core element here is that AI is completely dependent on data. So when you're already on a business intelligence or a data analytics platform, you have the ability to pull data and put it into AI. Now, what AI is, and I want to start with kind of big picture, and then we'll drill down. What AI is, simply put, is it's software that learns. It can teach, so it gets smarter is kind of a tough way to put it, but it gets more intelligent over time because it continually learns. And there are two types of AI, and this is one of the things that I really want to make sure that we're all kind of understanding, is there's machine learning, which is one type of AI, and then there is generative AI. And there's a big difference between the two, and I'll explain it in a few slides and exactly how we're using both. But they are so very different, and they have very different use cases. And the problem I see is that a lot of folks are just calling AI, and that already confuses the issue if you don't understand the differences between the two, again, because they have different use cases, different reasons why you would want to use one over the other. So basically put, as you can see, you need data. That's the first thing. The second is you use AI, which is going to learn over time, or it can be trained, and that means trained on specific data or trained on global data. And then you have generative AI. And generative AI, one of the things we see is a lot of applications that are just called AI, but they're actually several different pieces of technology bundled together. So when we're typically using large language models, which is the LLM, that's when we're speaking to AI, and we all know how powerful that is. But when you speak to an AI application using large language, and then you ask for an image, it's using another AI tool, another application that is a specialty on just image generation. And by the way, all AI is doing is predicting the future. One of the reasons my company is called Highbeam is I'm very much into prediction. Machine learning predicts the future. AI predicts where you're going. So if I said, for example, Mary had a little, that everybody in the audience right now knew I was going to say lamb. And that's basically what AI is doing, is it's looking at where we think you're going, and it's predicting your next step. And having that context hopefully helps you understand how to use AI in any circumstance, much less a business intelligence solution. So let me kind of walk through the different types of data analytics and where they belong. So right now we look at descriptive and diagnostic. So we've been doing descriptive and diagnostic data analytics for a long time. Those are Excel, CRM, ERPs, Google Analytics, that sort of thing. When you move down the next step, so now we're going to walk into AI, we're doing predictive. So machine learning is all about predicting the future. The difference now to move on to generative AI is that it will now include prediction, but it also will generate new concepts based on different data sets and based on different data elements. So it can be novel, it can create new information that was never prior to your request or your prompt ever existed. Whereas machine learning will never do that. It will give you an answer, a very specific answer, but it's not going to invent something new. And you'll see how that works as we walk through some of these additional slides. So if you want to use AI in your organization, or you're an entrepreneur and you want to create an AI application, you've got a couple different ways to go at it. One is just to buy, like we've seen online. You can buy an existing application, or an application that's a series of different AI tools. And again, they're all going to be dependent on data. You can do your own application development. So agentic AI is basically that. It sounds fancy, but basically it's an agent that's designed using AI, and it uses data and it uses different elements. And if you just Google onto YouTube, you'll get lots of different ways that right now there's a big wave of applications that are being designed. So they're no code agentic AIs, and they are awesome, and they are going to be changing the world, but they're not as mysterious as you might think. So I would encourage anybody to just type in agentic AI and see the different tools that come up, because you can actually build without any code. You can build your own agentic AI tool. For most of us, that's not practical, but it is helpful when you want to ask or acquire different types of AI, and you want to understand how it works, so you know what questions to ask, which is really the bottom line of what I'm presenting. Is I want you to have the background to know what questions to ask and where to point your efforts. The third way, and I don't think this is the only way, but these are the three primary ways to use AI, is through business intelligence. So let's drop into what that looks like. This is basically a business intelligence map. And what I want to take you through, I'm going to take you from the right side back upstream. This is literally how I learned how to use business intelligence. I started with spreadsheets. So right now, if you open Excel, we are on a Microsoft environment. So I actually learned how to build my entire system, starting with Excel. And on Excel, there's a little button on the top that called Power Query. That gets you started on understanding how to use data different ways through Excel. Excel is an awesome tool, but it's really this kind of standalone, and it uses its spreadsheet capability to pretend that it's a data warehouse. And why I say pretend is because it's really not a separate, fully functioned database, which has a lot of value in terms of your ability to build robustness and scalability and speed to the data that you're using. But Excel really is a mini, kind of a mini, and now with Copilot, kind of a mini AI tool, a mini business intelligence tool, so you can kind of conceptually understand how the whole process works. You move from spreadsheets, you go back upstream into business intelligence. And this is where you can actually download Power BI for free. You can download Tableau. You can use Looker, which is a Google tool that is free, and they'll connect directly to a database for you, and you can start using the other elements. Now, the reason why that's valuable is because you're going to be doing some additional processes along the way. As your data starts to grow, and as your calculations become more complex, things start to slow down. So just think of, once you start getting into gigabytes of data and you want an answer, we don't really tend to like to wait very much. We want to see the information right away. And that's a big part of why these systems are in place. So when you move to a full-size business intelligence system, which is database driven, it's going to have these elements. So it's going to show, let me see if I've got, first you have the source, then you have ETL process, which is extract, transform, and load. Then you aggregate, and then you distribute. And the reason why these 4 steps are really important is because on the left-hand side where I've got transform and staging area, a lot of people call those data lakes. That's where people are just dumping data from whatever source. So if I'm pulling source data from your ERP, and I'm pulling it from Google Analytics, and I'm pulling it from Amazon, for example, Those are very different data sets. They're formatted very differently. You can't treat them all the same way if you're going to be efficient in how you're delivering information and calculations. So you need to move it through this ETL process, extract, transform, and load. And what it does is it puts it into what's called normalized tables. A normalized table is now very nicely organized. The system knows where everything is and it's not scattered all over the place. And what that does is it allows you to have very fast responses and very accurate responses to get the information you want. So when you set up a business intelligence system, about 80% of the value is actually in the way you set up this entire database backend, that it makes it look super easy. It's the equivalent of putting the whole engine together and making sure everything runs and then getting in and driving it. You drive the car and you go, hey, this runs pretty well. That was easy, but there was a lot put into it. One of the ways that I kind of describe this entire process is think about going to Costco, for those of you that have Costco's in your neighborhood. And what happens out the back side of Costco, you have big semi trucks delivering huge amounts of information. I was going to say huge amounts of product. Well, that's just like these source products. Think of these 3 source products as big truckloads of data backing up and dropping it into a back warehouse. And when they pull it out of a truck, they take it on forklifts, they unpackage it, and they organize it. So then they put it on the floor. And when you put it on the floor, that's the equivalent of the ETL process. It's put out there so now you can access it. You're not getting the stuff you don't need, and you're getting access to the information that you need or the products you need, and then you put it in your cart and you can take it home and make your meal. And that's really kind of the idea behind the data, is you're taking huge amounts of data and then organizing it so it's really easy for the individual user to get the information they need. So the next slide I want to show you is really where AI fits and the difference really between machine learning and generative AI. So you can see on the bottom, and this is a mirror of our system. This is the depiction of our system. You guys saw the little blue box there called Prophet. That's an open source machine learning predictive engine. That's what we use to predict the future. That is machine learning. It is not on the tail end where you can see generative AI. And the reason why is because we take the data and then run predictions on SKUs, individual items, which is why that's the only market we call on is companies that have products, because our entire system is designed around this entire business process. On the far right-hand side, you can see there's generative AI. Generative AI is the ability to use a large language model to go look at the data that's been organized or look at the calculations that have been made, including the predictive calculations, and be able to, using a large language, answer questions. What product's the most profitable? Which geography might be the ones where I should launch new products? That sort of very open dialogue with the computer. That's where generative AI can add a lot of value. You would not want to put generative AI back where you're trying to do precise forecasting of product sales. And it doesn't really do you much good to put machine learning on the tail end when you already want the information. That would mean you're hitting the switch. It takes us about, depending on the size of the data set, it takes us about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour to run a prediction. You don't want to wait 30 minutes to an hour. So everything is designed for the sequence and where the data is. And what we're seeing right now is a lot of folks are using generative AI, and they're going back to global data sets, of course. In this case, you have a controlled data set, so you have a high probability of accuracy from the generative AI itself. But when you go to a large global set, getting back over to generative AI, this is where we're seeing a lot of issues around the quality of the data and the quality of the answer, because it's going all over the place and it's being very precise about pulling in whatever answer it thinks it needs for you. And that's why I heard someone say it's the most confident liar in the world, because it'll give you an answer and it's absolutely positive that it's right, and it doesn't know whether it's right or it's wrong. So this is one of the issues around generative AI, is it is much riskier in use than Prophet, and especially if you have an open database as opposed to a system like this, which is completely closed. Okay, let's talk about use cases, and I'll take you through 2 use cases. I want to see how we're doing for time. So, and most of you have seen many of these. So just more as a reminder. So generative AI is search, video, audio, images, travel, recipes, creative writing. And I'm going to show you two use cases in just a minute that kind of push this into some real live examples. And then you can see that AI non-generative, machine learning, is very good at code generation, forecasting for decision making, correlations. So for example, we can do correlations around ad spend. Whereas if I spend $100 on an ad, what kind of revenue should I produce, or what ads will be most accurate, or that sort of thing, where it can really do kind of discrete analysis on behaviors, optimization for scheduling, non-generative machine learning AI is great, and then risk predictions and mitigating your risk. A general rule that I use beyond the description I just gave you is where when you're looking at machine learning, you're looking to get a precise answer. I want a very specific, precise answer for this question. Generative AI, and this is a generality, is really very helpful for ideation, meaning I want to start and I'm going to put a lot of stuff out there. For those of you that have done any work around prompting, one of the things I would encourage everybody to do is go look for a prompt model. There are great videos on YouTube that'll show you exactly how to use prompt engineering or using prompts. That's the way you tell AI what you want and tell it, more importantly, what you don't want. And you can start with generative AI and get an idea and start kind of ideate and get a sense of where you're going. And then when you get to the point where you want to be more precise, then you start to narrow it in. So it can go broader and narrower as well. I hope that makes sense. But machine learning typically is about forecasting and trying to forecast really precisely. So let me give you two examples. I kind of gave you one earlier in terms of how we're using it, where you might want to use generative AI versus machine learning. And I saw this application and I was blown away. This is really an ideal use for AI, for generative AI, which is in training. And there is, I just saw a video, by the way, it's a TED Talk. Most of us know about the Khan Academy. They're using generative AI to help train or help teach most of us, but kids, younger kids at basically, it's like them having their own tutor. So there's a lot of noise about how negative AI might be, but in some ways it may be some of the best stuff you can get. So think of it as having your own tutor. And in this case, the Sandler folks are using it as prompting and sales training for their staff. So they can put all kinds of criteria in the back end of this. You have to configure it, you have to put the pieces in place, but they put a lot of use, a lot of effort into how people are going to use this. So for example, they can put into their sales training, I'm going to be calling on a global company that has distribution mainly in the US, but it's pulling product from Asia and from different areas. They can put a whole scenario of the type of company and then have the salespeople train on those specific use cases and use the generative AI to question the salesperson and to give him feedback and measure. So you can see it, first they configure it, then they use the application, and then they're able to give the salesperson who's in training measurement. So that's a really ideal use case. I also just ran into a company that's using a very similar AI methodology to do strategic planning. And it's very impressive. They can get interviews from a series of different customers and users and employees, and they can aggregate that using AI to find out what's the most important elements that they're interested in, what are the strategies that aren't working. It gives you a lot of insight and really accelerates that whole process. It's not taking anybody's job, it's literally making them more efficient at what they're doing. Now let's jump over to machine learning. And in this case, there isn't, like in all cases, there isn't any one, just simple one way to do this. In our case, you've got unsupervised and supervised. So those are technical terms in much the way the application is designed. And what I want to say about that is that what you pay for is what you get in not all cases. It's kind of like wine. There's inexpensive wine that's delicious. But in the case of AI applications, There are companies that are investing a great deal of resources into training and using both human and machine learning training on their AI engines so it gets you a more accurate outbound result, which is sort of what you're looking for, obviously. In our case, we're using, oops, I just slipped ahead. We're using supervised learning and regression over here on the far right to do predictions. So let me take you through what our predictions are, and then I'm going to walk you through the use case. So on the left-hand side is the history, and on the right-hand side is our prediction. So we're able to look at all this history and use AI as a method to predict both revenue and profits, gross income in this case, by individual SKU. That is not something that would normally be real easy to do. There are arithmetic methods to do this, but it measures seasonality, which is why it needs multiple years. It also measures trends, and then it smooths over anomalies. Those are kind of the three major elements that it takes care of. So we use this forecast to actually allow our customers to forecast what their profitability and revenues might be because of the tariffs. So this is an example where I'm actually very interested in saving jobs, which is I want my clients to know ways that they can maximize their gross income, their profitability by using these different inputs along a baseline forecast. So the bottom here on the, you can see, this is, I know this is a bit noisy of a chart, but it's the kind of data that you're going to see, which is you're going to see a baseline forecast of 6.19 million, and then a baseline forecast of gross income of 3.46. Well, you're able to plug in your tariff, your price, and your units. So we're seeing a downsizing of, or a drop off of sales of about 3%. We're seeing that we're going to raise our price, or this client's going to raise their price by 7%, even though they're taking a 10% tariff. And the bottom line is, if you look at the top center, it says 51,041. That is actually a profit increase. So this is a variance analysis. It is actually predicting that this company with this scenario, even though sales will go down and they'll have a higher tariff, because they were able to raise prices, we can actually predict that they'll make more money, not less money, as a result of that. That is something that so that's the use case for machine learning and how powerful that predictive analytics can be. Let me take you through. This is the real life application. That's basically the overview, and then the use cases for how you use the two. And again, the main element that I want you to take away is generative AI is one type of AI. They're all using learning. Machine learning is a precise use of AI. And in all cases, you need to understand what the data is that you're pulling in. If you're pulling data from any source, you're going to get greater variation. If you're pulling data in from a very defined source and a normalized database, then you're going to understand the quality of that data, and you're going to get more precise answers to what you're doing. So all AI is not treated the same, and all data that's being fed into AI is not the same. That's the end of my discussion. You're
Peter,
muted.
I'm gonna chime in with a couple of questions here, and if you have
Sure.
questions, please put them in the chat. Be the best way to make sure we don't miss anybody. But I'm curious. So from and this last example was really great. For a lot of founders, the biggest thing that they have going is projecting their like creating a pro forma,
Yeah.
trying to pull in what they know and what they don't know. They know that, that there's a potential that they're going to be in Whole Foods, three regions in the fall, and and that, that kind of thing. And then they also know there's just things that are going on, trends in the industry, and they also need to think about how they value their company. Okay, what
Yeah.
valuation do they put on them? So everything hems around that pro forma, that forecast, and how they go to market. When I'm seeing going to market with investors, could you maybe talk a little bit about using AI to do some of that and
Yeah.
understanding where you can draw data from and how you can pull in trends, sort of like this last one you talked about, but a little bit about that, because I think that's something that would hit home with a lot of people.
There's a lot there. So let's first start with just um, there's two elements to this. One is just using the data. Maybe a couple elements. First of all, you have to identify what the data is you need for the question you're going to answer, right? So you talked about valuation, and you asked about, where is the market going, for sure, right? So how do we know where the market is going? This model right here is pulling all this data from their accounting system. And it's pulling it real time and it's refreshing it weekly. That's one of the things that AI does, is it's going to do this fancy forecast, and it's going to do it very quickly and very inexpensively, so that as your forecast shows up, you already know there isn't a forecast that's perfectly accurate. We already know that. So what we want to do to mitigate that is we want to update our forecast very frequently, and you want to have a reliable way to update that forecast. The second part is the arithmetic. So the data itself, in terms of determining what the valuation is, there's a whole series of arithmetic calculations that say, am I measuring, what percentage of my revenue am I measuring? What percentage of my gross income and net income and EBITDA, and all those calculations on valuation. The third element is, where is the market going, and is there any other elements in the market that can tell me whether it's growing or it's receding within your specific set. So for example, here we have the ability to decrease or increase revenues by a certain percentage. Well, originally, depending on the kind of company it is, you can actually do a little bit of research and find out if there are government publications, for example, that are going to tell you what market segments are going to increase or decrease, and give you an idea of where it's headed. And that's one of the advantages of having something like business intelligence, is if you can find a data set, if you can find some information that will give you an idea of where things are headed, you can pull that into your model, and then with very little code, typically you can incorporate that. It just really, it's a question of problem solving and having that foundational model calculations you need, and to impact the model itself against your baseline. You can see we did this forecast. The original forecast is basically it doesn't have any outside influence. So what we're doing with these three elements, it's a simple model, obviously it's intended to be simple, is introducing elements that we know are happening to the market, so we can anticipate what is going to happen, knowing my forecast is only going to know the data that's coming in. And I want to encourage folks to use the analytical tools to give you that kind of untainted forecast for where you're going, and then use it to modify based on what you know. So if there's a new competitor in the market, you don't always want to code because there's a new competitor. You kind of want to use your computer tools and your software for what it's good at, which is calculating things very fast over and over and over again, and introducing variables that can change how it's working as you see the market. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. And so with that, I do have the question: is there an online source that you would recommend for, folks that are new to this? An online source, a YouTube's channel, somewhere where they can, start to sort of see and hone in on what it is they can do, how people are doing things. Is there some place you would direct them, or say, you mentioned a TED Talk. Are there a few places where they should look to be able to learn and understand what's available to them?
So yeah, I will tell you, I catch all the, when I get on YouTube, I get all of the YouTube's algorithms telling me about AI, generative AI, and data analytics and business intelligence and all that stuff, because I've been watching videos for years. So I have taught it in some ways to feed me the information. If anybody wants, and I can give this to you to share, I've got a couple of channels on business intelligence that are super helpful. I mean, you can get a Harvard MBA on YouTube these days. It is ridiculous. Maybe not literally, but
It would
it
be
is.
wonderful to have a few spots to be able to tell folks to go look.
Oh my gosh, there's so much great information. And then
Great.
because I'm in and I've subscribed to some of these channels, then I get all kinds of random stuff, like the YouTube video that was from the Khan Academy that I thought was, first of all, I watch TED Talks, and then I also watch AI, and it happened to be the convergence of both, and that was the discussion. And I am a big, obviously, I'm an advocate. AI is a tool. That's all it is. People are really kind of getting very upset about it. I don't know what other word, but there's a lot of drama around AI and whether it's going to destroy the world. I am not pessimistic. I think it's going to do way more good than it is harm. And the Khan Academy TED Talk is a really good example of how it's going to enable us to be better. Now, the folks that are going to lose are the people that don't really jump in. In my mind, I'm here, I built a whole business around it, are not going to jump in and say, data is the future. I've got to figure out how to manage this data, and AI is a tool that's really, at the end of the day, AI is a tool to manage this data in a way that can create value for me and my organization. That you got to start with that embracing.
If you could send me a few of those, I will make
Yeah.
sure I get them out to folks, and, I feel good that I don't need to start channeling my inner Sarah Connor here to make sure that we don't get overrun by AI, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the other part is, most of these like Tableau, if you want to start to understand business intelligence, they get you by having free downloads. So you can get now a lot of us don't want to learn how to do all that programming, and I don't blame them, but it really is good at least to watch some of the videos to have a sense of where this is. We did not get generative AI and machine learning mixed up in our application. Think of what a disaster that would have been. So we were able to build it with the right infrastructure because I did enough research on my own to understand where they belong and why they belong a certain way and use them correctly. So, if you're using a hammer to put in a screw, it's not going to work out real well. You got to understand this well enough to know how to use these tools correctly.
Okay, I'm trying to see if there's any questions here from folks. You can either raise your hand or stick it in the, chat. I wanna make sure we take use of Peter's time while he's here. Um So please, and Peter, is there anything else that you think folks need to know? Any parting insights that might be helpful in them making sure they can make use and understand, what the options are for people that are getting started.
So I will share, and I'll send this to you. We do all of our testing using Excel. Excel is still an amazing tool. This tariff workbench, I have a little model that I use to check it. For some of you that have small data sets and this is way too much, I'll share that Excel spreadsheet that I use that you just
Thank
plug
you.
in. So it's not fancy at all because I believe in keeping things very simple. The other is I can share as well a nice little prediction tool in Excel, which is basically, I'll tell you how you do it. You take 3 years of data, you need 3 years, and you multiply year 3 by 20%, year 2 by 30%, and year 1 by 50%, and that gets you a weighted average, and it gives you seasonality and 12 months, and you can do a 12-month forecast. And we used that originally to test this when we first introduced it and saw how much more accurate it was than
Wow.
the Excel model. But if you don't have any way to forecast and you don't know where to start, I've used it in many organizations for a decade, and it's a really good way. Let me back up one part. I want people to understand how you use the forecasting and the data. This gets updated every week. You know that the forecast will not be perfectly accurate. What you're really looking for, and you can see that in the sheet, is we start with a baseline and we do a variance analysis. We're looking at what's the difference between what I thought was going to happen and what is actually happening. That information is really where you're building your strategy and where you're defining your strategy. It's not in the final answer when you do the calculation. It's really in the assumption set when you start, and when you build a budget, you say, I'm going to do 5 million this year or 2 million this year. What you want to know is whether you're on track or you're not, and if you're not, where you need to make adjustments. That's where these tools become very valuable because it can look at all the detail. But until you're at that point, it's really important to put a baseline out there to calculate where you think you're going to go and then measure against that baseline to give you an idea of whether you're on track or you're not on track. And that's the information you use to make adjustments.
Okay. We have a question from Sasha. It's in the chat if you can see it.
I see. Wow, amazing if it's accurate.
Then we have a question, maybe it went to me, it went directly to me. We have a 3-year go-to-market strategy
Yeah,
in an Excel spreadsheet that
yeah.
we need filled out. Can we use the QBO to populate this sheet?
Can you use QuickBooks Online?
Yeah,
Um,
yes, yeah, that's the
that's a hard.
question.
Yeah, I think some of it. I'm not an expert at QuickBooks Online, to be fair. So it depends on what's included. Look, the key is really on the assumption set, and then are the next question is that it's the same thing about the forecast. That becomes your baseline to measure the results against, I think, if I understand the way the question was asked. So you wouldn't necessarily, you can use it. I know QuickBooks has the ability to do some budgeting, but that doesn't sound like that's what this is. This is projections on where your sales will be. And I think it's probably going to be better to export that from QuickBooks and make sure your Excel model has a variation built into it. And if you need to, make sure you've got someone that understands how to build Excel models like a database, because it's super crucial. I've seen people build these very complex, unwieldy Excel models, and when it's not organized correctly, it's very difficult to troubleshoot and to use and to update like a database. So I think Excel is probably going to be the better tool, and I would have QuickBooks feed Excel and say, what's the variance between what I thought was going to be here and what is actually showing up?
I'm going to ask Sasha if that answers her question. If she can hear us. There you are,
Yeah, can you
Sasha.
hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Hi, Sasha.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we have a 3-year go-to-market strategy that we're using to sort of manage our expectations and our conversations with our co-packer.
Okay.
And in terms of like populating this Excel spreadsheet, that kind of goes to show how, we're planning on building, scaling, progressing. I'm just wondering like where you would build or populate rather that document. Like, would it be from the sales from the last 3 years that feeds into it? Or would you just, how would you populate it otherwise if you're not pulling from old data?
And you're talking about trying to build a 3-year forecast for your company and understand what that's going to look like. Is that?
Yeah, with these specific metrics that are in the spreadsheet.
So,
as in, like, for example, this 3-year go-to-market strategy isn't just about predictions. It's also about how the COGS are expected to go down as we grow, so that we can we have expectations with the co-packer that like when we hit this amount of volume, the price is going to drop at these, at these different times.
Yeah, they've committed that to you.
They haven't committed anything because we haven't populated the spreadsheet.
I was going to say,
but I would like to populate the spreadsheet so that they can get an idea of how we plan on scaling, to put the expectation on them of how they should expect to reduce their COGS.
So the question is, how do you build that 3-year forecast? And do you use
like we already have the format and the structure and the Excel spreadsheet that gives us like all the metrics that we're supposed to input. We just need somebody to actually populate those fields.
Because you don't have existing data.
Well, we have existing data, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, how do you forecast the next 3 years based on what data would I use to use AI to populate this spreadsheet?
Okay, sorry to be so confused about it. So we use 3 years of sales history. All of the companies we call on have 3 years. Now, the exception to that.
And I'm asking you, like, where do you pull that from?
We pull it from the accounting. We pull it typically from an ERP.
Okay.
Now, That being said, companies introduce new products all the time, all the time. So now how do we deal with new product introduction when there's no history? We tie it sort of manually. It's through code, but it's manual. We tie it to an existing similar product. This is all about your assumption set. So I thought the question was going to be around not having the 3 years of history, which you can use really easily a generative AI. This is where it's a useful tool. You can ask generative AI to build you a 3-year sales history, and it will do the best it can. When you're starting out, this is why the refresh is so important, is then you say, I'm going to use 3 years of sales history. I'm going to manufacture it, or I'm going to manufacture 3 years of sales forecast. And then I'm going to watch it. And this is, again, this is where the machine learning is. When it says, when it thinks you're going to sell 100 and you sell 110, it learns that. When you think you're going to sell 110 and it sells 98, it learns that, and it gets more and more accurate over time. That's the value when you're ongoing and trying to get those refreshes. But if you need to create the data set itself, generative AI is very good at that. You can, there's some prompts and there's some videos online that will show you how to create synthetic data is one, that's a fancy word for it. Is it that sort of help? It's really on the setting the assumption set and then adjusting when you get into the, when you get on with your business and see that your assumption set is not going to be accurate, but that's sort of the point. At least you have a baseline.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
And you are more than welcome to reach out to me separate if you want me to help you even on some Excel stuff. I'm happy to, if I can see the sheet, I can give you.
I was going to say, I think seeing the template would probably clarify a lot.
Yeah. I'm happy to help with that if that helps.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I think one of the things that I hear you saying is that, you know, being able to do this is sort of like, you know, having your forecast. It's like thinking about the moving average on the stock market, right? Every day, every cycle, that moving average continues to get updated, continues to get better, continues to get more predictive. This is what you're doing when you're using AI for your forecasting. You know, every change in sales, every time you meet budget, every time you don't make budget, it starts to continue to learn and make that a much more predictive and a much more accurate forecast. And that's going to benefit brands when they're talking to investors. You say, you know, if you're able to say you've proven this model to be accurate and it's really forecasting everything that's in, it's going to make that forecast a little bit more solid. Investors are still going to pull it apart and put their own take on the perspectives of growth and everything else. But it's something that helps put a brand, I think, in a position to say, we're really honing in on our forecast and where we're going to be.
I want to just two things. One is in terms of the investor type is when the investor sees that you understand how this works and you're using it as a practical model to keep your company on track. You're not believing the future. That's the problem is we come in there and say, this is our projections. The investor already knows those projections won't be accurate. If you're pretending like they're not going to be, as opposed to this is our projections, and these are what we're going to do when we're not hitting the numbers, and that means above and below baseline, that to me is the next level of an investor saying they know what they're doing.
Right.
The other part is in terms of the prediction, this is the analogy I use all the time is when you get in, the further away you're driving and you get in and you use your Google Maps, the further away you're driving, the less, we all know it's, if I'm driving from here to the Bay Area and it tells me I'm going to get there in 6.5 hours, I know it's not going to be I know it's going to be close to that. Maybe, I don't know, will I hit traffic? There's all kinds of things that will happen along the way. If I'm going 2 blocks away, it's super accurate. And that's all predictions are going to be that way. The closer in, it gets more, it gets more accurate. Now, the other part is if you tell Google now, I'm leaving at 4 in the morning, you can go in there and set your time. It'll tell you what it thinks because that's the machine learning it's done over the years. It's seen those traffic patterns, and that's the advantage of AI. It's not just calculating the speeds on the roads, but over time, it can estimate what it's going to take in a given circumstance. In Google Maps, it's in a time frame that knows what the traffic is during those times.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
We are about out of time here. I don't see any other questions popping in. So I am going to thank Peter. I put his information in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to him. If you didn't get the information, reach out to me, tom@brandjectory.com. If you have any questions about Brandjectory, please reach out. This recording will be placed on our website, and we will send it out to everyone who was part of this. And I really appreciate everyone being here, and I really appreciate Peter taking the time to join us today and share this information. And we look forward to having him back in maybe another session, maybe even one of our problem solving sessions. Maybe that would be something he'd be willing to do, put him on the spot while he's online. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's
let's
something
do
we
it.
can talk about in the future. So I really appreciate everyone being here today. And Peter,
Thanks,
thank you
everybody.
again. Any last comments?
I think that's it. If anybody wants to connect to me on LinkedIn, I'm big that way. And then if you just have questions like Sasha did, I'm more than happy to help anybody along the way. We're all in the same boat, and we're trying to figure out, learn different things at different times. So I'm happy to help anybody out.
Thank you so much for that. With that, I'm
My
going to
pleasure.
close. Wish everyone a good evening, afternoon, wherever you are, and really appreciate everyone being here today. So thank you, Peter, and
All right.
thanks for everyone being here.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.